start with a few basic kind of concepts, because again, I'm hoping part of what we'll do is kind of a contrast in trying to understand better these words like gospel or kingdom or glorify, trying to understand what really do they mean. And another real important one is a little phrase that is often used in churches, to trust Jesus. What does it mean to trust Jesus? Have you trusted Jesus often meant, have you believed the right things about Jesus and the cross so that you get to go to heaven when you die? That's kind of what it meant to trust Jesus. It means I trust that my right belief about some aspect of Jesus will get me into heaven when I die. In the New Testament, to talk about trusting Jesus just meant to believe that Jesus is right. To trust Jesus means to think he's right. Right about what? Right about everything. It's right about whatever he said. That's what it means to trust anybody, just to think they're right, or at least be prepared to act as though they're right. And what can happen sometimes is we can redefine trusting Jesus so somebody believes that they have trusted Jesus to get them into heaven, but they don't actually trust anything that he says about money or love or anger or, anything that actually governs life. And that's not actually trust. So I want to talk about belief for a couple of moments as we get into the Trinity and thinking about what Jesus said and what does it mean to follow him, is to think a little bit about what does it mean to actually believe Jesus. And this turns out to be trickier than it would appear on the surface. You can think of belief in three different ways. There are public beliefs, and there are private beliefs, and then I'll come back to this. There's a mental map about how things are. Okay, public beliefs are beliefs that I want you to think that I believe, whether or not I actually believe them. You might remember the story where the wise men are going to search for the baby Jesus, and Herod says to them, go and find him, and when you find him, come and tell me that I may worship him also. Now, Pilate did not actually believe that Jesus merited his worship, but he wanted the wise men and others to think that he did. So that's public belief. That's stuff where I want you to think that I think this, and so I'll try to say things to get you to believe that I believe it. Private beliefs are things that I think I believe, but in fact turn out to be kind of fickle inside me. Private beliefs are those things, those ideas that I think I believe, but actually when push comes to shove, I find out differently. This is a little bit like in the upper room before Jesus died. Peter said to Jesus, when Jesus said, you're all going to run away from me? You're all going to let me down? Peter said, not me. Everybody else might run away from you, but I won't. Now, when Peter said that, was he sincere? Yeah. But when push came to shove, he did not actually believe that Jesus was worthy of not running away. So that's a private belief. It's something that I think I believe, but it turns out when push comes to shove, when it's actually time to take action, I find out I really didn't believe it after all. And then at the third level, Dallas would say, everybody has what might be called a mental map about the way things are. Okay, we all have a picture of reality or a mental map about how things are, and you never violate your mental map about the way that things are. So, for instance, when it comes to gravity, I just believe that if I step off of a ledge, that gravity will assert itself and that I will fall. And therefore, I don't step off cliffs unless I wanted to hurt myself. My behavior is always a result of my intentions plus my mental map about how things are. Now, I never have to conjure this up. I never have to try to say, today I'm going to really believe in gravity. I don't have to psych myself up to do that. It's just the way that reality appears to me. And we all live at the mercy of our mental map about the way that things are. And what's really critical about this is, a lot of times, I may not know what it is that I really believe about my mental map. And so there'll be people that if you ask them, do you believe the Bible? They'll say, well, yes, I believe the Bible. I believe it's the inspired word of God and so. But then you have statements like in Acts where Paul says Jesus taught that it's more blessed to give than to receive. Do I really believe that it's more blessed to give than to receive? Well, I think I do. Like when you ask me that, I affirm, yeah, that statement is true. But when you look at my actual behavior, when you look at what do I actually do with my stuff, it turns out that I don't believe it at the level of my mental map about how things really are. And so this is really critical. When the Bible talks about trusting Jesus or in about our faith, what really counts, what really matters is that there's a change in my mental map about the way that things are. Because I always live out of this. I reveal my mental map by what it is that I actually do. I never step off of ledges. Why? Because my mental map tells me that gravity is in session right now, that gravity is in operation, and I never violate that. My actions always reveal my actual mental map. In the same way that my works, that is my actions, that is what I do, they reveal what it is that I really believe about how things are. And what Jesus wants to do is to change my mental map about the way that things are so that I naturally do the kind of things that Jesus talks about doing. One of Dallas's definitions of spiritual maturity is a spiritually mature person is one who effortlessly does what Jesus would do in their place. And of course, it's that word effortlessly that gets you. First time I ever heard that. Effortlessly does. Why? Well, it's just like you and I effortlessly obey gravity. We don't get up in the morning and say, man, I got to really remember, I got to psych myself up today. I really believe in gravity. It's just part of my mental furniture. It's how I look at the world. And for Jesus, the presence of his Father, the presence of God, the reality of good, the power of prayer, that was just all part of his mental map. And Dallas used to say part of the goal in spiritual transformation is coming to believe with my whole body what I say that I believe in my mind. Again, one of the big problems for us as disciples is we think we believe stuff that we don't actually believe. Like, yeah, I affirm the Bible. If you ask me, do I believe in the Bible? I say, yeah, and the Bible says it's more blessed to give than receive, so I must believe that. But then when it comes out to, like, what do I actually do with my stuff? It is more tricky to find out what do I really believe than it first appears to be the case on the surface. And what I believe may be made clear in certain circumstances in ways that they're not in other circumstances. Several years ago, a friend of mine got a surprise gift for me in the San Gabriel Mountains. He took me up there, and then the gift was that we were going to go paragliding. Anybody here ever paraglide? I had never done this before. And so they gave us this little lecture about hang gliding and how the carabiners work and all this kind of stuff. And as they were telling me all of that information, it all made sense to me. I believed it all. Okay? So I'm on the San Gabriel Mountains, and when I'm over here and they're telling me all of this stuff, I believe it all. When I got to the edge of the cliff, guess what happened to my level of certainty? It changed dramatically. And when I thought about going over the cliff, all I could picture was my body lying dead at the bottom of the gorge, and my children having no father, and my wife dating other more attractive, wealthier men, because I'm just gone. And my level of certainty changed dramatically from here to there. So a couple of key concepts when it comes to faith. One is, what's the level of certainty that I have about something? Another real important part of faith is commitment. You know, certainty is mostly a product of the mind, and we attach probability. I think it's 10% likely or 50% likely or 90% likely. Okay, certainty is a product of the mind, and there's a feeling quality to it. You feel a certain level of certainty or not to something. Commitment is an act of the will. Commitment is when I say, I will do this or I will not do this. Now, I cannot generate certainty by willpower. And one of the enormous difficulties folks have in the church, because we talk about faith, is people think it's their job to generate more certainty. And so they try to do that by willpower. That's a very bad, very dangerous thing to do. Certainty does not work that way. Certainty is a byproduct of things like studying and knowing and experience. But you cannot generate a feeling of certainty by willpower, and it's a bad and dangerous thing to try to do it that way. Even when certainty is not possible for me, commitment is always on the table. Commitment is always possible. And when Jesus calls us to have faith, he is not saying you need to try to generate more certainty. But he is certainly calling us on the basis of real good reason to commitment. That is, to follow him. To act as though what he's saying is true. And then over time, transformation of my mental map begins to happen. Remember many, many years ago, going to a seminar that Dallas taught, and there was a little saying of his on the wall, which was, the will is transformed by experience, not information. The will is transformed by experience, not information. And I'll say a bit about this also, and then we'll get into the Trinity stuff. I think one of the big illusions that we tend to have in the evangelical church is that if we just pour more exegetical or theological information into people, they will become more mature, more spiritually mature. And that's not the case, and one of the questions that kind of points that out is, have you ever known anybody who knew 10 times more about the Bible than the average person, but was not 10 times more loving than the average person? And of course we do. Information is very important, but not sufficient for transformation. Information is indispensable, but not sufficient. And another picture of this one. Years ago, I took each of our kids to this little camp my old church used to have up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan called Camp Paradise. It was a very primitive place, no electricity, no lights, no running water, no heat. I don't know why they called it Camp Paradise, but they did. And it had a ropes course. So, again, we'd all be down here, and we get all kinds of information about being up in the ropes course and carabiners and halters and how strong they were. And all of that information made great sense to me. And then we went up onto the ropes course, and there'd be all these different dimensions to when you're walking on a rope ladder and jumping across the leap of faith and going on these nets and stuff. And you're like 30 feet up in the air on the ropes course. Now, down here, I heard all this information, and I believed it all. What do you think happened when I got up here? Well, it turns out my palms did not believe it. And my armpits did not believe it. Okay, and there would be this swirl of unwanted thoughts that would cluster in my mind. Now, if I'd have gone back down here and you'd have asked me a test, and like, do you believe the carabiners are safe? Absolutely. But many parts of my body did not believe when I was up here what my mind affirmed down here. Now, here's the thing. I could sit in this class for 1,000 years. I would be able to memorize every word of that presentation, and that still would not change what my palms and my armpits believed up here. Now, there actually is a way for that to be changed. There were kids that worked all summer long at Camp Paradise, and they would go up on that ropes course every day. And when they would be on that ropes course every day, and they would have those halters and ropes and carabiners on and so on. And by the end of the summer, when they were up there, they could be up there with enormous ease. And their armpits did not sweat, and their palms did not get clammy. They came to believe with their whole bodies what they affirmed with their minds down here. And one way of thinking about discipleship is the ropes course through which we come to believe with our whole bodies what we say we affirm with our minds. And this gets to great passages of Scripture like Romans 12, I beseech you by the mercies of God, do not be conformed by this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And just before that, he says, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, we'll get to these parts of the person that Paul is referring to here. The will, I beseech you. Present your body. Now, presenting your body is something that you can do. This gets into spiritual disciplines. You can go up on the ropes course. And then through this, your mind can be renewed. Now, you can present your body. Notice Paul says, I beseech you, present your body. He doesn't say, I beseech you, renew your mind. He doesn't say, I beseech you, transform yourself. Okay? All of this can be done only by the power of God. There is a role for our will to play, but it's not the renewing of our mind or the transformation of our lives. It much more often has to do with presenting our bodies. And there is this ropes course, and if I actually present my body a living sacrifice, if I go up there every day, day after day, eventually I will find my mind has been renewed. And I am able to go up there and not think about what a long, awful, painful death it would be if I were to fall. I am free to think of other, more interesting thoughts. Give you another wonderful saying of Dallas's. One of the marks of maturity is the thoughts that no longer occur to you. One of the marks of spiritual maturity is the thoughts that no longer occur to you. And this has to do with the renewing of my mind. The first time that I ever serve, if I never do that, first time I actually wash the dishes, I'm filled with, gosh, what a wonderful person I am. What a heroic thing I'm doing by doing the dishes. Nancy, come here and look, quick. Let's get a band and celebrate and so on. Eventually, over time, like for Mother Teresa, she did not think about what a wonderful person she was being when she was serving. It just looked normal to her. It looked sane to her, and her mind was free to think more interesting thoughts. One of the marks of spiritual maturity are the thoughts that no longer occur to you, because the mind is being renewed. So I'm coming to believe with my whole body. What I say, I affirm in my mind. And as that's happening, then my faith is moving from, well, I want other people to think I believe this, to I think I believe it, to this actually is just the mental map out of which I live. And see, when it gets down to this level, then obeying Jesus no longer looks heroic or extraordinary any more than obeying the law of gravity looks heroic or extraordinary. That's one of the amazing things about Jesus. To all of us, we'd never think, what an amazing person, he's observing the law of gravity. See, well, for Jesus, life just looked that way. And it didn't look extraordinary or heroic to observe the law of love or to live in confidence under the presence of God. It just looked that way to him like gravity looks to us. Genuine transformation doesn't take place until the truth that Jesus came to teach goes from this level to this level down to this level. And then it just looks normal and sane. Okay.